It was a cold winter night when I picked up a stranger on a deserted highway. It was a bitterly cold winter night, and I was driving my long-haul truck down a remote highway, heading toward a forgotten little town barely marked on the map. The road was poorly lit, only my headlights cut through the darkness, casting pale beams over the desolate trees and wilderness on either side. Aside from the occasional static-filled radio broadcast and soft music from the old FM station, there was nothing. Just silence. I had been driving for over 10 hours. Fatigue was setting in hard. My eyelids felt like weights, and I had to keep tightening my seat belt, gritting my teeth to stay alert. That's when I saw him. A figure standing on the shoulder up ahead, a man in a dark coat, holding out his thumb in a hitchhiker's gesture, barely visible through the snow and mist. My gut tensed. Hitchhikers out here, this late at night, were rare and always came with a warning. But he looked desperate, cold, tired. Against my better judgment, I slowed the truck and rolled down the passenger window. "Need a ride?" I asked. He nodded, his eyes shadowed and tired. His voice was low and tight. "Missed the last bus. I just need a lift." I let him in. He climbed into the passenger seat silently, shut the door, and stared out the window into the pitch-black night. For a while, it was quiet. Uncomfortably quiet. Then I noticed something strange. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror. Repeatedly. Like he expected someone or something to be behind us. I tried to ease the tension. "What's your name? Where you from?" He hesitated. "Jack," he said finally. "Coming back from a nearby town." His voice was flat, expressionless, cold. Then, without warning, the GPS went haywire. The screen flashed white, the route disappeared, and the speaker let out a burst of static. The cabin lights flickered. The air turned sharp and icy, like something had sucked the warmth from the truck. "This isn't right," I muttered. I turned to look at Jack and saw that his face had gone pale. His lips curled slightly into a thin, unsettling smile. "This road doesn't lead to that town," he whispered. "It leads somewhere else." My heart started pounding. "What do you mean?" Suddenly, the truck jerked. The steering wheel locked for a moment, and the vehicle slid off the asphalt onto a narrow side road I hadn't even seen. We came to a stop. No street lights. No signs. Just pitch darkness, and faint whispers, drifting in the air like voices carried by the wind. I reached for the door handle. Locked. Jack turned his head toward me slowly. His voice had changed. It was hoarse now, almost broken. "Welcome to the midnight road." Outside the windshield, the forest seemed to shift. The trees weren't just swaying, they were moving, warping, changing shape. I could feel something pressing against the truck, something unseen, bending the world around us. Then the cold hit like ice in my lungs and I was thrown back into my seat as if by some invisible force. I looked over. Jack's face was no longer Jack's. It was the face of an old friend of mine, a fellow trucker who had gone missing years ago. "You got stuck too?" he murmured, his eyes blank but knowing. In that moment, something broke inside me. I wasn't sure if I was still alive, or if I had crossed into some twisted loop of time and space. The road was gone. The town was gone. Everything I thought I knew gone. And somehow, the real story was only just beginning. I'm a night shift nurse. Last week, I found room 404. I work night shifts at a suburban teaching hospital, an old, concrete building from the 1980s, with long hallways and flickering fluorescent lights. Nights are quiet. Only the ER has any real activity. The upper floors are mostly dark, like a half-asleep giant breathing softly in the shadows. It was a Friday night, around 11 p.m. when I was reassigned to check on a new surgical patient. The chart was oddly vague: male, age unknown, no family, admitted unconscious. Room number, 404. Immediately, that raised a red flag. Our hospital's numbering system skips room 404. Everyone knows that 404 is internet code for not found. The hospital's IT architect specifically omitted it to avoid database errors. But there it was, clear as day on the paperwork. I went up to the 4th floor, counting rooms as I passed: 401, 402, 403, and then, just a blank stretch of wall before room 405. But tucked between 403 and 405 was a metal door, old, gray, unmarked, the kind of institutional door that squeaks when pushed. The room number plaque had faded into a smudge. I tried the handle. It opened. Inside was a single bed. A dated heart monitor beeped in slow, irregular intervals: beep, beep. The man on the bed had a blindfold on. His arms and legs were strapped to the bed frame. He was breathing steadily, but completely still. I glanced at the whiteboard hanging by the door. Patient ID, X404. Condition, persistent coma, day 11. Do not wake. I stood there for a while, watching him. I couldn't shake a strange, crawling feeling I'd seen him somewhere before. Back at the nurse's station, I tried to pull up his file, but the system couldn't find any record of X404. Even weirder, the name of the attending physician was listed as me. But I'm not a doctor. I'm a nurse. I don't have the authority to issue orders. That field should be been locked. I called over a colleague. "Do we have a coma patient in room 404?" I asked. He gave me a puzzled look. 404, you're tired. There's number 404 on the 4th floor. Never has been. Just 401 through 403. I dragged him back to the hallway. But the metal door was gone. Just like that. A clean white wall where it had been. I finished my shift in a daze and went home without sleep. The next day, I came back and pulled my paper records. Sure enough, there were handwritten notes from the night before: vitals, pulse, respiration rates, all under patient X404. The paper chart was still there, but the electronic file had vanished. Even my access logs for the fourth floor were flagged as invalid location. I started to think I was hallucinating, until I got a phone call. The hospital switchboard patched it through. The voice on the other end was low, raspy. "You're not coming to see me tonight." "Who is this?" "You signed the order last night." "Didn't you, nurse?" My stomach dropped. "Are you X404? He didn't answer. Just whispered, "I'm waking up. Don't you want to be here, to see it?" And then the line went dead. I rushed back to the hospital, desperate to prove to myself it had all been a dream. But when I got to the fourth floor hallway, the door was back, slightly open, light spilling from inside. The monitor was still beeping. The man on the bed had removed his blindfold. He was awake now, staring directly at me. His eyes were alert. His lips curled into a slow smile. "You came," he said. It was the same voice from the phone. "Who are you?" I asked, frozen in the doorway. "I'm the one you forgot," he said calmly. "The patient you signed off on for transfer 10 years ago." It hit me like a freight train. Back when I was new, I'd been involved in a critical case. A post-op patient had fallen into a coma. Because of delays during a transfer to another facility, he was declared brain dead. I'd been pressured to sign the DNR paperwork. The ID number on that file X404. You can't be alive," I stammered. He just smiled and nodded at the monitor beside his bed. "But you've been coming to check on me every night, haven't you? After all, there's no such thing as room 404. I turned toward the door. But there was no door. No knob. No frame. Just a smooth white wall. No exit signs. Nothing. I looked down. My nurse scrubs were gone. I was in a hospital gown. A plastic ID band was around my wrist. It read, "Patient name, X404. Reason for admission, dissociative disorder, persistent hallucinations. Attending physician, blank." I don't know anymore if I'm staff, or a patient. All I know is, every night, a nurse walks into this room and stands quietly in the doorway. She looks just like me. Last October, I took part in a solo camping challenge. I wasn't alone. It was a small, invite-only challenge. Participants were required to spend 3 nights alone in a remote national forest. No cell signal, no internet. Just a map, a compass, and basic survival gear. The organizers had set up 7 tents deep in the woods, each about 50 meters apart. Red fabric strips marked the boundaries to make sure we stayed within our own zones and didn't disturb each other. I was assigned tent number 5. The tent was new and well equipped, stocked with a sleeping bag, drinking water, and a survival kit. The first night was cool and calm. I built a small campfire, cooked up some soup, and sat quietly under a sky full of stars. It was almost eerily quiet. Aside from the occasional rustle of wind through the trees, I didn't hear a single human sound. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard footsteps crunching on dry twigs, clearly human. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the sound. Nothing. I figured maybe one of the other campers had gone out to relieve themselves. I didn't think much of it and went back to sleep. The second evening, I decided to walk around the area to familiarize myself with the terrain and check for water sources. According to the map, there were 7 tents in total. I started from the east and passed tents 1, 2, 3, and 4 before arriving back at mine tent 5. Beyond that was just the forest edge. But then I saw a tent that wasn't on the map. It was tucked between 2 old trees, right in the narrow space between tent 5 and the boundary of the forest. It had no red marker, and the flap was half open. Inside, it was completely empty except the sleeping bag was already laid out, the water bottle full, and the gear, identical to mine. I stepped closer and called out, "Hello, anyone there?" No response. I looked down at the ground, oddly clean. No footprints. No drag marks. The soil around the tent was untouched, like it had been lowered from the sky and set down perfectly in place. Something about it felt wrong. But I tried to rationalize maybe the staff had set up an extra tent for emergencies. I returned to my own tent, but I didn't sleep well that night. Around 2 a.m. I heard footsteps again. Closer this time. Crunching leaves maybe 10 feet outside. They circled slowly around my tent. I held my breath, clutching my Swiss Army knife in my sleeping bag, waiting for the sound to fade. In the morning, I went back to that spot. The tent was gone. All that was left was a patch of flattened grass and a soaked red fabric strip. It was labeled Tent 6. I froze. That marker hadn't been there the night before. I tried signaling the organizers using the emergency beacon, but got no response. There were still 2 nights left, and I had no choice but to tough it out. Until the 3rd night. Storm clouds rolled in, and the wind picked up. I extinguished the fire early and stayed inside the tent. Sometime after 1 a.m., I was jolted awake by a soft, unmistakable sound, a zipper. Not mine. I peeked out through the tent flap. By the faint moonlight, I saw a figure standing exactly where tent 6 had been. He didn't move. He wore a hood, face obscured in shadow, and stood perfectly still, facing my direction. I whispered, "Which tent are you from?" He didn't answer. Instead, he slowly lifted a hand and pointed at me, then at himself. And without a word, turned around and walked into the forest. I immediately grabbed my pack and gear, ready to evacuate. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of the red tag on my own tent flap, Tent 6. I had started in Tent 5. I knew that. Panicked, I pushed through the forest, trying to follow the trail back to base. But my GPS stopped working. My compass spun in circles. The entire forest felt like it was playing tricks on me. It took me over 4 hours to navigate using only the rising sun to guide me. When I finally reached the main camp, one of the organizers gave me a puzzled look. "I thought you were in tent 5, he said. "Why are you carrying the tag for tent 6? I looked down. A wet, dirt-stained red strip was clipped to my backpack zipper. In clear lettering, it read, "Tent number, 6 assigned camper, unknown." I used to work the night shift at a 24-hour convenience store. The store was in a remote suburban area, surrounded by empty streets and barely any houses. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The pay wasn't great, but the job was easy. Just man the register, restock shelves, maybe make a cup of hot coffee now and then. But after a while, I started to feel like something wasn't quite right at night. The first thing that tipped me off was the security footage. It was a Tuesday night around 2 a.m. I was restocking the ramen shelf in the back when the front monitor glitched. A quick flicker, then the normal feed came back. I walked over to rewind the footage. There was a figure standing in front of the beverage cooler, dark hoodie, jeans, face hidden under the hood. But I knew I was the only person in the store. I tried not to freak myself out. Told myself it was probably just a video artifact. But when I opened the fridge to check, there were 2 sets of wet footprints on the floor, leading from the cooler straight to the counter. That night, I closed the store early, turned all the lights on, and sat there wide awake until sunrise. A few days later, something else started bothering me: the transaction logs. Some purchases had timestamps from the future. Like, one said 4 hours 52 minutes and 31 seconds, but I looked at the wall clock, it was only 4:48. That sale included a bottle of water and a bag of candy, a combo I never sold to anyone. But the receipt matched the item codes exactly. And the cashier named mine. I pulled up the footage for that timestamp. At first, nothing. Just empty frames. But the moment the clock hit 4 hours 52 minutes and 31 seconds, the feed started shaking. Then a figure entered the store. He wore a mask, couldn't see his face, but the part that chilled me was when he walked in, he looked directly at the camera. And smiled. Like he knew I was watching. From that night on, I started getting a strange feeling, like I wasn't really working the night shift, I was just replaying someone else's job. It's hard to explain, but whenever I stood behind the counter, scanner in hand, I felt like I was mimicking a memory that didn't quite belong to me. I began to suspect the me in the footage wasn't just a recording, maybe it was another version of me. Overlapping. One night, a familiar customer came in, a trucker everyone called Frank. He usually showed up around 3 a.m. for coffee. That night, he looked more worn out than usual, but still gave me his usual friendly nod. As he approached the counter, his tone suddenly changed. "You know," he said, "this place, it didn't used to be like this." I blinked. "You mean, like, the layout?" He shook his head, eyes distant. "No, I mean you. You weren't like this before. Before I could respond, he turned, and walked out without even grabbing his coffee. I ran after him, but he had vanished. Even weirder, there was no record of Frank's visit that night. No transaction. Nothing. I started digging through the store's old records. That's when I found things that made no sense. Same names showing up on different dates, identical items sold under the same receipt ID, multiple times. Some entries were marked with things like image error, unable to save. Then one night, I finally saw it. It was around 4 a.m. and I had nodded off at the counter when the door chime rang. I opened my eyes, no one in sight. But the monitor showed someone walking in. That person was wearing my uniform, had my posture. Even the pen in the pocket was clipped to the same side. He walked slowly to the counter, and stared at me. I stood up, looking between the empty store and the screen. According to the feed, he was right in front of me. I waved my hand. On the monitor, he waved back half a second behind. I couldn't help myself. I asked aloud, "Who are you?" He didn't answer. He just reached into his pocket and pulled out a receipt, pressing it against the glass. On the screen, I saw it clearly: final transaction processed, ID 0000. I looked down. Under the counter, there was an identical receipt, same print, same time stamp, 5 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds. Exactly when my shift ended. I looked back at the screen. He was still there, then turned around and walked toward the exit. But I heard the footsteps. Loud, clear, the sound of shoes on tile. And that's when I knew. Whoever, whatever he was in the store with me. I grabbed my keys and bolted out the door. Didn't he turn off the lights? Didn't he lock up? I quit the next day and never went back. Weeks later, I finally asked a friend what had happened to that store. He said, "That place, it's been closed for a while. No one wanted the night shift. Last guy who worked nights, vanished. Cameras glitched out. They never found him." I asked if he remembered the guy's name. He thought for a second and said, "I think he had the same name as you." Weird, right?